Namaste Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye. Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nanda Gopa Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namah. Namo Pankajanaභaya Namo Pankajamaline Namo Pankajanitraya Namo Pankajangrahe. Hare Krishna. So we're reading from Canto 2, the Cosmic Manifestation, Chapter 10, which is Bhagavatam is the answer to all questions, text 30. Nidhithya atmamayam hridayam nirabidyata tato manaschandra iti sankalpa kama evacha. Nidhithya atmamayam hridayam nirabidyata tato manaschandra iti sankalpa kama evacha. Synonyms. Nidhityasho, being desirous to know, Atmamayam, own energy, Hridayam, the location of the mind, Nirbidhyata, was manifested. Tata, thereafter, Manaha, the mind, Chandra, the controlling deity of the mind, the moon, Iti, thus, Sankalpa, determination, Kama, desire, Eva, as much as, Cha, also. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. When there was a desire to think about the activities of his own energy, then the heart, the seat of the mind, the moon, determination, and all desire became manifested. Purport. The heart of every living entity is the seat of the Supersoul Paramatma, a plenary expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Without his presence, the living entity cannot get into the working energy according to his past deeds. The living entities who are conditioned in the material world are manifested in the creation in terms of respective inclinations inherent in them, and the requisite material body is offered to each and every one of them by the material energy under the direction of the Supersoul. This is explained in the Bhagavad Gita 9.10. When, therefore, the Supersoul is situated in the heart of the conditioned soul, the requisite mind is manifested in the conditioned soul, and he becomes conscious of his occupation as one is conscious of his duty after waking up from slumber. Therefore, the material mind of the living entity develops when the Supersoul sits on his heart, after which the mind, the controlling deity, moon, and then the activities of the mind, namely thinking, feeling, and willing, all take place. The activities of the mind cannot begin without the manifestation of the heart, and the heart becomes manifested when the Lord wants to see the activities of material creation. So some prayers. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapadakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamcha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitam Sham He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Sapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhaiva Cha Patitanam Papanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Welcome, dear devotees, to this morning's Bhagavatam discussion. I am not very qualified at all, but I have an opportunity to present and glorify the Bhagavatam and the Lord. And in particular, this last few weeks, I've kind of been blissfully busy with the winter retreat and Maharaj's visit and everything, and also somewhat not so blissfully occupied with year-end work-related stuff. So please pardon me if my thoughts are not very organized, but I'll share what I have prepared. And before I start, I seek all of your blessings and the blessings of my Guru Maharaj, so that I can say something of some value. In the previous verses, we have been hearing how we and every part of our body and its activities are completely dependent on the arrangement of the Lord, right? And every organ manifests with the desire of the Lord. So as the Lord desires to do a certain activity, the appropriate tool gets created. So, for example, I think yesterday we heard that, in the last couple of days we heard that as the Lord wanted to consume food, the gross sense organ, which is the abdomen, manifested, and then also the subtle sense organ, the antrani, part of the intestines, which can absorb the food, manifested. And along with that, the deity, the controlling deity Samudra, manifested, so that all these activities can be managed and controlled, and thereby the Lord and a living entity can feel satisfaction from a full stomach. So it's like, if you think about it, and all these other activities that we've been hearing about, how logical and how beautiful creation is, right? It's like a huge contrast from this popular silly belief that the Big Bang Theory creates everything. I mean, it's really a wonder. I mean, and it's I keep having arguments with my kids as well about that. But how could something illogical as Big Bang Theory become, the accepted reason for creation? It almost seems like, what the scientists are doing is like child's play. There's this expansive cricket ground or football ground, whatever be it. And these scientists are dabbling in one little corner, and they're, thinking that this is it, this is all there is. And in complete illusion. And, the things that they come up with are so much in the platform of mental speculation. Whereas we learn from the Shastras that true knowledge is revealed only by the Lord. And it happens when we are, one takes a humble position, right? And everything else beyond it is really outside of our realm of understanding. And this is true for material knowledge as well as spiritual gyan. So sometimes this whole section, I mean, I know the first time that I read it in this canto 3, etc., this seems so technical and hard to understand. But as I was listening to some lectures, the thing that I realized is that the important takeaway and the essence from this section is really the Sambandha Gyan, right? Our Sambandha with the Supreme Lord, to understand how delightfully, closely we are related to the Lord. Right? So firstly, the fact that the Lord is a personality, and as He desires for some activity, we also receive the ability to do that activity. And so so while He is fully independent, we are fully dependent on Him. And this in itself is a great recipe for devotional service. So what do we have to do? All we have to do is perform some sacrifices to please the Lord. Right? And in our case, of course, it is Sankirtan, Yajna. So that's like a perfect relationship, right? So coming to this verse, after having created all the karmendriyas and the jnanendriyas, the Lord is desiring to think about the activities of His energy. And so the appropriate gross organ, which is the heart, manifests. And along with that, the mind, which is the related subtle organ, and the controlling deity, the moon, manifests along with the activities. And the activities are determination and desire. So in the purport, Prabhupada is explaining that the heart of every living entity is the seat of the Supersoul Paramatma, the plenary expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Without His presence, the living entity cannot get into the working energy according to his past deeds. So although the various organs are manifested by now, to animate the activities and the organs, Paramatma appears in our heart. And Paramatma motivates and enlivens the living entity. So once again, it is so clear that we are completely and utterly dependent on the Lord, the Super Soul. We in fact cannot think a single thought, or as they say, raise a finger without the sanction of Paramatma. And for that matter, we cannot wake up from sleep in the morning or fall asleep without that sanction. So talking about sleep, living entities have three states of consciousness. One is Jagruti, which is the state of wakefulness, which is where we are right now. The other is Sapna, state of dream. And then Shushupti, deep sleep. Apparently there is a fourth state, but we won't get into that right now, and that's for a very special situation. So Paramatma facilitates the switch between these states. So while we are awake, Paramatma allows us to act, and during this stage, our gross body, our subtle body, everything is fully active. And then during Sapna, as we are trying to go to sleep, the gross body is asleep, but the subtle body is still active. We are still kind of dreaming. There are still thoughts, there is activity going on there. And then at Shushupti, even the mind is at rest. So everything is, getting rested, and at the same time getting recharged and rejuvenated for the next morning. How amazing is that, right? And this switching happens and is guided, by Paramatma. If Paramatma did not switch us back into wakefulness in the morning from Shushupti, we would just continue to sleep and die in our sleep. But the Lord, very mercifully wakes us up every morning. And like Prabhupada says, and he's saying here, when, therefore, the super soul is situated in the heart of the conditioned soul, the requisite mind is manifested in the conditioned soul, and he becomes conscious of his occupation as one is conscious of his duty after waking up from slumber. So when we wake up, we know, we have to take a bath, we have to wake up the deities, go for Mangalarti maybe, go to work. Of course, people like me, even in spite of that help, some days I just wake up feeling completely lost as to what day of the week is it, what am I supposed to do? But I guess that's just, me getting old, I guess. But Jokes apart, in Bhagavad Gita 15.15, Krishna speaks about, gives that same message, right? So he says, Sarvasya Chaham, and this is one of my favorite verses. Sarvasya Chaham Riti Sannivishto Matta Smitirjnanam Apohanancha Vedescha Sarverahameva Vedyo Vedanta Krit Vedavid Eva Chaham. So it translates to, I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. And of course, by all the Vedas I am to be known. Indeed, I am the compiler of Vedanta, and I am the knower of the Vedas. And Prabhupada has elaborated on that in the purport as, the Supreme Lord is situated as Paramatma in everyone's heart, and it is from him that all activities are initiated. The living entity forgets everything of his past life, but he has to act according to the direction of the Supreme Lord, who is witness to all his work. Therefore, he begins his work according to his past deeds. That required knowledge is supplied to him, and remembrance is given to him, and he forgets also about his past life. Thus, the Lord is not only all-pervading, he is also localized in every individual heart. So, the Lord is, helping us in every way, in everything that we do. And for all kind of perceptions to take place, the heart, has to be in place. So this verse is this action is so important. In the verse also, the verse says that the heart is the seat of the mind, and Prabhupada elaborates that as in the purport as the material mind of the living entity develops when the super soul sits on his heart, after which the mind is the controlling, and then the controlling deity, the moon, and then the activities of the mind, namely thinking, feeling, and willing, all take place. So, we learn that mode of goodness in touch with ego generates the mind. And the mind is chief, right? Is the chief of all the senses. So wherever the mind goes, the sense organs follow, right? And so it is so important to be able to control the mind, right? The common saying is that mind can be our enemy or our friend. So how is that? Right? That all depends on how we train the mind. And training can happen either way, right? We either train, positively or negatively. On the negative side, which is very easy to do, at least for me, it sometimes can start with, okay, just let's listen to this one craving, just one time let me watch this one little episode of, some serial. And then the next thing will be, with Netflix and everything being available at all times, that 3 episodes have gone by and the evening is all gone. So firstly, so much time is wasted, plus all the characters and the story, just linger on in the mind and consciousness. And then the next day we keep thinking, oh, what happens next, right? And we want to waste more time later. So it just goes downwards. So it's so important to say, no to the mind, right, for something that's unfavorable. And that's the way, and of course, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur has said, beat the mind with the shoe and with the broom and whatnot. But that's the way to make to manage all these unwanted desires of sense gratification, and gradually manage and gradually remove them. Now, we know, of course, that it is not easy. And Krishna himself had said in Bhagavad Gita 15.7, the Mamaivam Jiva Loke verse, that the living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. But due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the 6 senses, which include the mind. But at the same time, when Arjuna said, Chanchalahi Mana Krishna, that the mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very strong, and O Krishna, to subdue it is more difficult than controlling the wind. Krishna responds to that, saying that yes, it is undoubtedly very difficult to curb the restless mind, but it is possible. And how is it possible? By suitable practice and by detachment. So a lot of people, write about this enigma called the mind, which we can't see. The other senses we obviously can see and see them in action and whatnot. But the mind, there's a lot written about it. And to many, detachment means detaching from everything, going into this impersonal void. But fortunately for us, Prabhupada and our acharyas have given us that knowledge that that kind of detachment is not sustainable. Right? And Prabhupada has given a very practical and a very sweet way of achieving the detachment in practical terms. And what is that? So it is gradually detach from material things, but at the same time add Krishna. Right? And so then simultaneously we are attaching ourselves and generating love for Krishna while we are detaching from the material. Right? Again, so very logical. Right? So now, why is this so important? Right? To do this simultaneously, because we've learned again that the mind's main purpose is to think about Krishna, and that is the way to reach our soul and Paramatma and Krishna. We hear the verse. We've heard this verse about Maharaj Ambarish, Savai Mana Krishna Padara Vindayor. We've heard this so many times while reading this chapter. That Maharaj Ambarish always engaged his mind in meditating upon the lotus feet of Krishna. And by engaging, along with the mind, engaging all his senses in devotional service, in all these various engagements to the Lord, he was able to increase his attachment to the Lord and become free from material desires. Now, the other, very important thing about the mind is that the mind goes with us to our next life. If you look at in chapter 15 again, this is, I just read some of these translations. It talks about that. The living entity, text 8 here, the living entity in the material world carries his different conceptions of life from one body to another, as the air carries aroma. Thus, he takes one kind of body and again quits it to take another. In text 9, the living entity, thus taking another gross body, obtains a certain type of ear, eye, tongue, nose, and sense of touch, which are grouped about the mind. He thus enjoys a particular set of sense objects. Again, all this is taking place around the mind. And goes on to say that the foolish cannot understand how a living entity can quit his body, nor can they understand what sort of body he enjoys under the spell of the modes of nature. But one whose eyes are trained in knowledge can see all this. And in text 11 says that, again, the endeavoring transcendentalists who are situated in self-realization are the ones who can see this clearly. But those whose minds are not developed and who are not situated in self-realization cannot see what is taking place, although they may try. Very, very, it's so important to follow these instructions, the instructions given by Krishna and our acharyas, and really clean up our act in this life itself. Right? Put our mind in order And Krishna gives away in 9.34 as well. I mean, he very nicely, says what to do with the mind in order to get there. Manmana bhava madbhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru mam evasyasi yatvaivam atmanam matparayana. Engage your mind always in thinking of me. Become my devotee. Offer obeisances to me and worship me. Being completely absorbed in me, surely you will come to me. So, start with the mind, engage your mind. So, therefore, in the purport, the first line, Prabhupada says, Krishna consciousness is the only means of being delivered from the clutches of this contaminated world, starting with training the mind. So that's where I will end today. Thank you very much, and I'm sorry if I misspoke anything. Please add or correct. Again, I don't have much depth in philosophy, so but I'm grateful to have this opportunity to go a little deeper and glorify and meditate upon Srimad Bhagavatam. Anybody wants to add or correct anything I've said? Okay, let's see. We're almost at 8 and towards the end of the
Hare
year.
Krishna, Mataji, Danutpalam. Thank you so much for the class. I think you gave a very nice perspective today. Thank you. It one was the mind, which I always fail. I'm trying. The other one was the heart. Quite often we always think that this brings back to the reminder for all of us, the way you spoke, that we are not the body, we are the soul. In that way, you brought up that heart, and then the soul, and then the super soul in the heart, right? So what I was thinking is, we pretty much, we are always thinking about, I'm the body, but one tiny heart, a fist size of the fist of our hand, maybe smaller. If you take that out, the body is gone, completely gone. There is nothing with the body. And in that, on the top of it, if you look at it, we don't say, suppose I don't know about the soul or the super soul, just the heart itself. If you take it out, the body is dead. There is nothing other than the heart. So similarly, if there is a soul, the Paramatma comes later, say suppose, right? As an individual soul, as a living entity inside the body, if that is not there, there's no consciousness, even in spite of having a heart. Yes, we have a good heart, whatever heart, good body, very built body, but that soul is there, not there, and the body is completely dead.
Just dead.
So that was a kind of, that something came to my mind. Oh my God, yeah, you're right. It's like Paramatma comes later, because of course, as you also said, sometimes I ask Dhananjay Pandit, Prabhu, how do you think, even though you sleep around 12 o'clock, suppose sometimes he sleeps around 12 because there's so many things going on. The clock in his, he automatically wakes up around 2:30 or 3 or something like that. I was asking, how do you wake up? Because don't you feel that body is tired? He said, I have no ideas. My body clock automatically wakes me up. So I think you brought a point that Paramatma is the one who wakes us up to the whether body is tired or not. That's the one who wakes up. That came to my kind of a flashbulb for me. You're right. The body is tired. Yes, body is tired. But if the soul is active and Paramatma is super active, yeah, of course, he is the one super active in our consciousness. If he is not there, the soul is dead. Soul is there, but soul has no power without Paramatma.
It's all facilitated.
Oh my God, what a link it is. So I was thinking about it, Mataji. It was a very nice class. Thank you so much for reminding many things. Hare Krishna.
So, thank you so much. Thank you for your comments, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Yes, Prabhu. And one of the things is, which I did not get to go into, but desire, which is the activity of the mind and the heart. And the desire is so, so powerful. Just because we have this desire, Paramatma facilitates so many things for us, depending on which way our desire is. So that also, and I'm sure that comes, handy for our Dhananjay Pandit Prabhu waking up at 2:30.
Yeah. The desire, don't ask me what my desire is. My desire is everywhere, right? So yes, that means Krishna sanctions. You see how he is giving us the free will, and whatever you want, he sanctions. That means Dhananjay Pandit Prabhu, that is his desire. Even though he sleeps, doesn't sleep, that is his desire. And he is super active the whole day. Even he sleeps 1 hour a day, you don't feel that he was tired or body tired, nothing. Oh my God. Thank you for that.
Thank you, brother. Okay. If nothing else, we are a couple of minutes over.
We have a message from Amritakali Mataji, so I may read it for you. Thank you so much for Hare Krishna. Thank you so much for such beautiful class, Mataji. Few messages you shared are very simple, succinct, and yet very deep. I join with her. Thank you. Brought out the very important points regarding the Bhagavad Gita and about the mind. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mataji. Thank you, Amritakali Mataji as well. Okay, so we will end here today then. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Hari
Bol.
Kripa Sindhu Patisanam Papani Vaishnave Punamo. Yes. Lakshmikant Prabhu. Thank you.